Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and as always, with me is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you tonight?
Hey, man, I'm doing great.
That's awesome. I love it when you're doing great.
Feeling good.
Talking about unsolved crimes.
Yeah.
All right, Gibby, we got to give some Patreon shout-outs, and we've got 2 new Patreon supporters today. So special shout out to Savvy Geek Girl and Megan DeLon. Thank you so much to both of you for your support.
That's awesome, man.
And all the other Patreon supporters that continue to give us support. We can't thank you enough. It helps allow us to do what we love to do and provide the content that you want. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Gibbs. So let's get this episode started. You know, we're talking tonight about 12-year-old Jennifer Renee Odom. And I want to start off by playing a clip, and then we'll go from there.
Someone out there knows the person or people who have done who has taken someone who is very precious from our family.
We're hoping that that one person that knows something will say, I know this.
So the second person that you heard, that was Jennifer Odom's mom. And that clip occurred shortly after Jennifer was abducted on February 19th, 1993. She disappeared near her school bus stop that was really just a couple hundred yards away from her home in St. Joseph, Florida. Now, this is a pretty rural community. It's Pasco County, northeast of Tampa, to kind of set the scene of where this is. Now, Jennifer got off the bus on the way home from school. She waved goodbye to her friends on the bus, but she never made it to her house.
And I think it was noted that day that some of the students recalled that there was an older light blue pickup truck in the area.
Yeah, and not just students. There were some other witnesses as well that basically said, you know, it was, like you said, older, it was faded, mid to full-size blue pickup truck that they saw near Jennifer's bus stop that day. So they saw the truck, but they never saw the abduction.
Right.
But we know she never made it from that bus stop, which is just a couple hundred yards away from her house, to her house.
Yeah,
so
because
something happened.
Something happened
in between those two places.
Right.
And it was said that Jennifer, and she had a younger sister named Jessica, and we'll hear from her a little bit later, but they came home from school on 2 different buses. So they arrived at different times. And it was said that they liked to play hide and seek, and sometimes one would try to lock the other out of the house, and it all depended on, you know, who got home first. Now, when Jessica, the younger sister, got home that day, the door was locked. But again, if they were used to playing this game, that probably wouldn't scare her right away. Jessica was 9 at the time. You know, we mentioned Jennifer was 12. But Jessica went to her grandmother's house, who apparently lived pretty close enough for her to walk. She got a key. And when she got back home and got into the house, Jennifer wasn't there.
February 19th, 1993. And it was a normal day. 4 o'clock came and Jessica called me and said, Mom, Jennifer's not here. I knew right then that something was wrong. And it doesn't get any easier. You just learn how to cope. We talked about it. We played it out every day. If something wasn't right, drop your stuff and run. You know, zigzag the orange grove.
The fact that we knew not to get in the car with anybody, and we even practiced it, that just doesn't make sense to me. So that part of me makes me think that it was somebody that we knew.
Is it somebody that we eat dinner with on a regular basis? And was it somebody that helped out with the search? Was it somebody that came and gave me a great big hug during all this time and said, I'm really sorry? We were always the people that thought, no, it's not going to happen to us. And it did. So you can't ever not tell them enough that you love them, because one day they might not be here.
So again, that was Jennifer's mom, Renee. And in the middle there, you can hear Jennifer's sister, Jessica, a little bit older. I mean, this tape was obviously a little bit later in time, but I wanted to play it now because, you know, it kind of goes through some of the details. And
boy, you can still hear the emotion today.
oh, the heartbreak. And what she says at the end, you know, couldn't be any more true.
Right.
Right? You never know what's going to happen. You have to tell the people that you love how you feel about them every day. I couldn't agree with that more. But yeah, it's heartbreaking, and you can hear that. Now, we talked about the witnesses and what they saw with the pickup truck and everything. Over the next couple of days, law enforcement and hundreds of volunteers,
Yeah, hundreds of them,
would get involved. But again, and you and I have covered a number of cases that involved children. And I think we've said this before, but there's nothing that gets people more incensed, riled up,
yeah,
than when a child is missing or when something happens to a child. Right? So we've got all these volunteers. The police have their police dogs, and they're basically, and you heard it mentioned in the clip, these groves of orange trees.
yeah. There's like 60 square miles of those orange groves.
Yeah, and they've got to scour this entire 60 square mile piece of land. And in addition to these orange groves, you know, you've got pastures, you've got woods.
Yep.
We said this is a rural setting.
Then you got the waters of the Lake Lovita.
Yes.
So I know that they do go there, and they do check the dock area, and they check around the boathouse that's near that area. I mean, they're looking everywhere. They're trying to find any signs of her. They're trying to find any signs of this old light blue full-size pickup. Anything they can do to get any type of lead.
Right. So they're going all out.
They're going out.
I think that much we can say. So unfortunately, Gibbs, 6 days after Jennifer vanishes, a couple finds her remains. And so they've spent this 6 days. Everybody's out looking for her. And this couple discovers her body on a horse riding trail
Yeah.
near Spring Lake still in Hernando County. It's about 10 miles from where she disappeared. So Gibbs, this is the tough part, but we have to talk about it.
Okay.
Jennifer, this 12-year-old little girl, she's found nude. She's only wearing 2 rings and a gold necklace with some charms on it.
Yeah.
One of the charms is a half heart that says best friends. I mean, it starts to choke you up just thinking about this.
Sure.
But we have to set the scene. I mean, we have to tell the facts. Investigators would identify Jennifer's body through the necklace and through fingerprints. Now, the very strange fact is that Jennifer's clothes, and they know what she was wearing that day. She was wearing a red sweater and a white zip-up Hooters sweatshirt, a white turtleneck shirt, white denim pants, and black boots, and none of this has ever been found. So what does that say? That the killer took that with them,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Your thoughts on the suspect being comfortable enough to bring a body familiar with the area, local? I mean, this is not just a random.
Oh, definitely, I believe he's local guy in the area, local person, and had knowledge of this area. She gets off the bus, they see her walking down the road, and for the most part, that's the last time they see her. These guys all talk. They tell a wife, a girlfriend, a brother, or they brag to somebody, or they actually feel guilt, and it bothers them. In this case in particular, I don't think it bothers that person too much.
So that clip was a police detective talking about some of the facts of the case. But, I guess what I found interesting in that clip was he clearly thinks that the suspect was local.
And it makes sense. I mean, for where they found her back through all those orange groves and stuff. I mean, you had to have some type of working knowledge of that land to get where she was at.
I would think so too. Now, obviously that clip was later in time, and a
Right.
lot of these are, because I couldn't find a lot of clips from the 93 time frame.
Right.
But I found, later clips of them talking about it.
And we know that on March 1st, the detectives come out and they say her cause of death is major head trauma. And we know that they also say that she was where she was found is where she was killed. She wasn't killed somewhere and then brought to that area. So they took her to that area and killed her there at that location. And they also say that she was killed very, very soon after she was abducted. And I know we've done some other stories, and they say that. They say that normally the person that's being abducted is killed within...
Well, that's why they have a show called The First 48, if you've ever watched that.
No.
I mean, it basically is...
It's the time clock starts ticking?
Yeah. And I think you'll hear that a lot, right? The first 48 hours in these type of scenarios are the most important.
Yeah.
Because the statistics, I believe, bear out that the majority of people are killed fairly quickly after they're abducted. I mean, there's not many cases like Castro up in Cleveland where,
Right.
he kept those women for
years,
a
and years
very,
and
very
years.
long time. There are some examples of that, but I think the majority are what you were saying.
So, Mike, we did another case on our other podcast, True Crime All the Time, and it was Melissa Huckabee. And in that case, there was an FBI profiler, and she basically said that typically within the first 6 hours is that window time that most people that are abducted are killed.
So she's lowering it even more.
Absolutely.
Than the 48.
Yeah, that window's really short.
And now that I think about it, that 48 is I think it's more about crimes being solved than it is specifically about abduction.
Abduction. Okay.
So that does make a lot of sense that that window might be even smaller, because now that I remember, I'm thinking about back watching the first 48. They're not.
It's about leads getting cold.
Yes, right. It's about solving crimes, but not specifically about crimes of abduction.
Yeah, so,
I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and so when the detectives come out and say this, that they know she was killed shortly after being abducted, I'm not surprised by that.
I'm not either.
Right, and I'm not surprised that she was killed where they found her because of the location. It seems to me that it's pretty private. I mean, she's found within a bunch of pine trees, surrounded by the orange grove.
It was a place, I believe, that offered a lot of privacy.
Yeah, and you would have to know about that. I don't think you would have just grabbed a 12-year-old, right, and just
tried to figure out where you were going to go.
Yeah. This is a place you definitely were aware of, that you took her there for the purpose of whatever heinous acts that he was going to,
commit. And I think that goes back to the detectives saying, or their theory, that this is a local person.
Exactly.
That would feed right into what you're saying is, and it is hard. I think it would be hard to abduct somebody and then try to figure out where you're going to go, especially if you don't have any or not very much familiarity with the area.
Yeah, especially a 12-year-old. I mean, she wasn't a big girl, but she was, they say 4'10". So I mean, she's gonna be somewhat of a struggle, I mean, unless you drug her. I mean, she's gonna put up a little bit of fight, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know about that. I think you're probably right. So Jennifer's mother and stepfather, they didn't actually go and view her body. According to Renee Converse, Jennifer's mother, for her, it was just too hard to believe that the body was really her because they never saw her.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they made the conscious decision not to go and view the body right after it was found.
That'd be tough.
But that also, I believe, caused her not for it to not really sink in right then.
Full acceptance.
Yes. Now, obviously, they would have seen the body at the funeral and sometime later, but they chose not to go see the body.
It's almost like you kind of want to have a little bit of hope
somewhere
deep inside.
I just don't think she even wanted to believe.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't either.
You wouldn't want to believe that that's
12-year-old girl, man.
That's the case. Now, on January 5th, 1995, this is almost full 2 years after Jennifer was murdered. There's a couple that is looking for scrap metal. They're in a rural area of Hernando County, and they come across Jennifer's book bag and her clarinet in a trash pile somewhere out in the woods. Now, this is a big find.
Yeah. I mean, they find the clarinet case. They find the book bag. I mean, this is what people have been waiting for. Something to have some type of connection.
Yeah, 2 years has gone by.
Yeah, that's a long time.
But now that had to have sparked, big time hope. I mean, obviously not for Jennifer. She's gone. But hope in that they will find some clues that they can find her killer. It's said that the bag and the case are found in pretty heavy brush. And this is about 30 miles from her home.
Yeah. Still in the same county.
And this is interesting too. 30 miles from her home, 18 miles from where her body was found.
Right.
So you could, and obviously I don't have a map, but I'm sure you could draw a correlation between those 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
And what does that mean? Does that mean something?
Yeah.
Does it mean that he's traveling only so far to do these things?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, does that even further mean that he's local? I don't know if it does or not.
It's hard to tell. I mean, you'd have to really think. I mean, did he pitch these as he was headed out of town?
Right. He could have.
Right.
For sure. Now, I do believe that investigators thought that also it had something to do with the suspect being local. But it goes back to what you were saying. It's more familiarity with the land, the back roads. Keep in mind, like we said, this is very rural. These are a lot of back roads. Some of these are not even paved. And this guy's going to very, very out of the way places to hide things.
Right. But this is a good lead because if you go back, just real quick here, if you go back to August 25th of 93, the year she was murdered, we know that they put out the first reward of $20,000, right? They went to a local radio station and offered $20,000 for the conviction of her killer. But nothing really generates from that. And then we know in December of 93, that's when a lot of young female victims, murder victims, were showing up throughout the country. We had 12-year-old Polly Klaus.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was a national media case. We had Angie Houseman. She was 9. We had Cassidy Center, 10. That happened outside of St. Louis. So this renewed some interest in the Odom case, right? Because at this point, this is December. She was found in February. So this generated some more interest, and they were trying to get some more leads. And to the point in February of 94, they come up with I guess you call it a marketing plan. That's the best way I can describe it. They decided to do these 10 billboards across the county. And on the billboards, they put the pictures of her missing jacket, her missing clarinet case, her book bag. And the billboard says, "My murderer has these clothes, clarinet, and book bag." And it goes out on 10 billboards across the county. And within the first week, they start getting a bunch of new leads start trickling in. But again, nothing really develops anything solid. And then, of course, like Mike just said, this couple comes across the actual book bag and clarinet case. And so now they have some better physical evidence. Now, I don't know if they ever I don't know if they were able to ever lift any fingerprints off any of that.
They did get a fingerprint from the book bag, and that was huge.
That is good.
But as of right now, they've never, obviously this case is unsolved, or it wouldn't be unsolved.
Right.
They've never been able to connect it to anyone, but they haven't given up, and we'll talk about that later in the episode. But let me play this clip real quick.
It is the most troubling case for me personally.
Colonel Michael Maurer was there 18 years ago when Jenny's body was discovered. And there 2 years later, when a couple walking in the woods found Jennifer's book bag. It would be the first solid piece of physical evidence.
Everybody just back out, and that's when the patrolman goes, "Whoa," and he stepped and he looks down, and then I look down and there's the clarinet case.
Inside would yield a partial fingerprint, not from Jennifer. That evidence now takes up rows and rows of boxes and binders, the most space out of any cold case in Hernando County. It sits in an FBI hard drive, the print constantly checked against the National Criminal Database. Recently, every Monday, Hernando's cold case team sets aside that day alone to look over Jennifer's evidence again and again, hopefully for the last time.
There's just too many messages that we're not supposed to give up on this case.
So they talk about the fingerprint that was lifted from the book bag. But again, we know as of today, they've not connected that to anyone. But what I really took away from that is they've not given up. I mean, they're talking about every Monday. And again, this is a clip from many, many years later.
Right.
That they're constantly, and that's one thing that you and I talk about a lot. Are they constantly running the evidence, and especially fingerprints, because it's pretty easy. You just keep you run it through the database.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting to hear him say that's what they're doing, because on a lot of cases, that's what I always wonder.
It's definitely reassuring that at least we hear them saying that they do it, so hopefully everybody else is doing it.
Yeah. Now, DNA,
It's a whole nother story.
it's a whole nother story, but they've got a fingerprint. And so, to me, that tells me a lot in this day and age, because there are a lot of reasons to get fingerprinted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, if you killed a 12-year-old girl in 1993, you're going to not want to get fingerprinted.
You're going to do everything you can not to be fingerprinted.
Right.
That's for sure.
But also in my own mind, that means you can exclude a certain part of the population.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, I don't know about down there, but I know here, in Ohio, right, you have to get fingerprinted for a number of things.
It's almost hard to get a job without being
Right.
fingerprinted.
You know, a teacher, sometimes to coach your kids in
Yeah.
Little League,
Absolutely.
you got to submit a fingerprint. You definitely have to when you go to get your concealed carry license, if you're
Yeah.
going to do that. So there, you know, I'm not saying that, I don't know how much that helps, but you can exclude some people.
Yeah. Military people.
Military
Yeah.
is all, you know, they're always fingerprinted.
Right.
So again, unless this guy, and we're assuming it's a guy, right? But unless this guy slips up and somehow gets himself fingerprinted, I don't know that they'll ever connect it by running this.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about how many years have gone by, but the investigators, from all accounts, they followed up on well over 7,000 leads. That is a lot of police work.
It's a whole lot. And
to follow up on 7,000.
And I know we're talking about suspects here in a little bit.
Yeah, we will.
So, and they had a few, but we'll get to that.
So, you know, you talked about a lot of the things they did. I thought the billboard thing was a very interesting idea to help generate leads. You talked about the reward. Now, in 1994, this case was on NBC's Unsolved Mysteries. A lot of people will remember that. I liked it. I used to watch it. But the interesting part about this Unsolved Mysteries episode was that they had a psychic on. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, you know, anytime a psychic gets involved, that's where things start to go crazy. And this lady's name was Nancy Meyer, and she was brought in to work with some of the local detectives. She wasn't allowed to see the crime scene photographs. They were classified. What they did do is they had the photographs on a table in front of her, but they were turned face down. This is my understanding.
Okay.
And what Nancy, the psychic, is saying is that she's able to visualize not one, but two killers in detail. And she gives a lot of detail about these people.
Wow.
So whatever you believe in psychics, whether or not you believe in any of that, I just think it's very interesting that she calls, she's talking about one of the guys has very wiry arms, you know, not like powerful, like bodybuilder, but powerful in the sense of where somebody works with their hands a lot.
So it works in the Orange Grove area?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
She goes on to say what she thinks they are.
Oh,
but
okay.
the next day, they take Nancy to the scene of the abduction, to the bus stop.
Okay.
She points out where the killers had stopped. And her, I don't want to call it a theory because she's a psychic, so I don't know what you call it, but her sense
Right.
is that these two men in the truck stopped and asked Jennifer directions. And she goes on to say, like, this is a movie in her head, like it's playing.
Yeah, she's playing it back like she's watching it on TV. I gotcha.
You know, again, I don't know if I believe any of this stuff, but I find it very interesting. So the spot where Jennifer's body was ultimately found, it was marked by some flowers and a cross. And, you know, that's very normal. You see that a lot. Sometimes when people are killed in traffic accidents, you'll see that on the side of the road. Now, Nancy asked the detectives if they found any small metal jewelry belonging to Jennifer anywhere around the area. And apparently they had. So there were some things that she was extremely accurate on. Again, I have no idea how much she knew in advance.
Right.
I don't know any of that stuff. But they thought that she had some things to add, and they were pretty impressed with her accuracy. Two other things I just want to talk about. what the psychic said. She talked about seeing a case with lettering on it. And the sheriff's department did say that Jennifer Odom had her cousin's clarinet case with her when she was abducted. And her cousin's clarinet case had the letters LO on it. That's the clarinet case that they found.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And the psychic was able to say the lettering.
Oh, wow.
If you believe that.
Right.
You know. But again, could she have known that? I mean, you said there was billboards. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard telling.
So her final take was there's two killers. Both are mechanics. Both are muscular, but not in a bodybuilding sort of way. The kind of, muscles you get from wrenching on cars all day, probably. Mm-hmm. You had thought maybe it was working in the grows, but she said she thinks they're mechanics. They work as a team, and one of the men is a smoker with a bad cough. So again, she's given a lot of detail.
There's a lot of details.
I have no idea if any of it's correct, but to me, it's very interesting to know about.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, this lady has worked on some other cases in other areas, and she has helped out. So
her name sounds familiar.
Yeah, I didn't have the rest of the cases, but they did talk about how, I don't know if she's helped solve, but she's helped lead to some cases being solved. Again, I'm still not sure how much I believe in all that, but
yeah, but you know what? If it was your kid, I know I would try everything.
Oh, I'd have a psychic.
Yeah, I'd have multiple psychics.
I'd have the frozen head of Walt Disney. I'd be asking him questions. I'd try anything.
Right.
I would not
I
care.
Would too. I really would.
If it made me look ridiculous, I wouldn't care one bit.
Yeah.
I would do anything I had to do.
So in January of '94, they arrest a drifter. He's 43 years old. He's in Massachusetts, and he's connected with a murder of 2 children. And this sparked some interest with the investigators in the Odom case, because this individual, he used to live in Lake County, which is just a county or two over from where the body was found. But because of the ages of the 2 children, the way that they were murdered, it gives suspicion to the investigators. So they look into this individual for a little bit. However, nothing comes about it.
So this guy killed 2 other girls.
2 other girls.
And he lives in Lake, and
he used to be from Lake County.
Oh, he used to be.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then he moved up to Massachusetts. Right. However, there were still ties into how those girls were killed to how she was found.
Now, we talked about probably over 7,000 leads. Now, there's a ton of suspects, and we're only going to talk about
just a handful.
So many. What's the next one you got?
Well, I think one of the bigger ones that comes about is in March of '94. They arrest a 50-year-old Lakeland man, and I can say his name. So his name was Frank Potts, and he was arrested on charges that he raped an 11-year-old girl back in '93. And again, this gets the attention of the authorities looking at the Odom case, right?
I would think anybody that's arrested for sexual contact, rape, anything that has to do with a young female, a young girl,
right,
they're going to look at.
Yeah.
And see if there's any ties whatsoever.
Right. And it kind of mushrooms into more of an investigation across 6 states with him and 15 murders that he could potentially be involved in.
Oh, so this guy was a real piece of shit.
Yeah. So he, of course, we know later he turns out to be, a major serial killer, right? But during this time, it's just under the investigation process. Authorities confirmed that Potts owned a blue pickup truck, and also made efforts to try to change the way he looked around the time that Odom was killed. So he went to some extent to change his outward appearance, growing his hair out, growing a beard, versus to what he looked like at the time she was found.
All this sounds like something, a guilty person would do, but...
And then on top of that, they go to his 40-acre property that he has on, of all places, it's on the side of a mountain in Alabama. But they go to this area to see if they can find any additional evidence. When they get to the property, they find several grave sites. And in those grave sites are victims ranging from ages 12 to their early 20s. However, they can never link Frank Potts to the Odom case. So at that point, they never pursue it any further.
So, but tell me this guy's rotting away.
Oh, he is.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah.
But he sounds like he really could be
Pretty good suspect.
a very good suspect.
I mean, blue truck.
But here again, he's in the penal system.
Right.
They have his fingerprints.
Yeah. But, just because they find a fingerprint,
You're right.
right, it doesn't mean it could have been the music teachers.
We talk about
it could
this
have been
all
the
the
bus
time.
driver. It could have
Yeah.
been who knows who fingerprint it was.
Right. It doesn't, and I think we say this, but it doesn't exclude somebody.
Right.
It would match somebody.
Right.
But it can't exclude somebody solely based on the fact that
Yeah.
they found one fingerprint and it wasn't Frank Potts.
Yeah, and it wasn't him. Bad guy, though.
Bad guy.
And it seems like every time we do these stories, right, we stumble across some really bad individuals that were in the area or could have been part of this, but they're not. But it's still, it's scary.
It just tells you how many bad people are operating in an area.
Yeah.
At any one time.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a rural part.
I was gonna say it's we're talking rural. The week before or 2 weeks before, we had a podcast where we were in the east side of Philly, and there was like 3 or 4 serial killers.
Yeah, but that
working
makes more
zone.
sense because you're talking about a big city.
I know, but still, even
You just shit on
in
my
the-
point. You literally just took a dump on my point. You just contradicted my whole point.
Did I?
Yeah. Because I said it's amazing that you got this many bad people in an area that's so rural. And you said, yeah, we got 3 people in the Philadelphia. You just took a gibby right on my point.
Good point.
So Gibbs, let's jump to 98. They've got a man that they think they need to talk to.
Yeah.
They fly out to New England. They bring him back to talk to a grand jury. So they thought he was either a witness or...
Thought he was worthy enough to fly him back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because at this point, if you're talking to a grand jury, they got some evidence. But it turns out to be a dead end. There's just nothing there. So I'm not even sure why we're talking about it. It's just not even enough, is it?
Well, they don't indict him because the woman that alleged that he was part of this recants her statement.
Okay. Well, that's how how it becomes a dead end real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's jump to 2002, and investigators are looking into a Sarasota man. And keep in mind, Sarasota, Tampa,
Pretty close.
pretty close. So in 2002, investigators are looking at a man named Richard Ivanitz, and they named him as a possible suspect. So they're looking into him. But he had already killed himself in a standoff with police officers
Wow.
about something else,
A whole nother subject.
a whole nother thing.
Right.
But they think they've got some reason to think that he's a suspect. Of course, they can't talk to him because he's
Right.
killed himself. But after they do all this research, they find out that he was in prison at the time of the abduction.
Okay.
So it couldn't have been him.
So they ruled that out.
Yeah, but he was a suspect. So in 2003, a year later, authorities are still working the case hard, and they think they're close to closing in on the person that abducted Jennifer when they arrest a 53-year-old man who's naked, by the way, as he's trying to lure a 16-year-old girl into his car near Kissimmee, Florida. The detectives spend several weeks trying to tie him to Jennifer's abduction and murder. Now, this guy was a drifter as well, similar to what you were talking about earlier. And apparently he'd have been arrested like 70 times.
Wow.
In 8 different states over the past 35 years. So he had a hell of a record. The problem is that they ultimately find out that on February 19th, 1993, the day that Jennifer disappeared, he was in Maine. So they were able to substantiate that, and then that ruled him out as a suspect.
So we're 10 years after her death, and we're still nowhere.
No,
with any good suspects.
No, but they're working the heck out of this case.
They are. I mean, they
you got to give them credit for that.
Absolutely.
So we go 1 year later.
Yeah.
2004. A 37-year-old felon is arrested in the kidnapping of a young woman. They immediately think Jennifer Odom. Right? Like we said, I think they're looking at all these cases where people are abducting young women.
Sure.
And they've got to take a look to see if this could have been the same person that abducted Jennifer. And there were a lot of similarities because this girl was 11 years old. She was from Sarasota. Jennifer, we said, was 12. And they look at him hard. I mean, they're working with the officials in Sarasota. And this guy, he's a felon. He was a drug addict. But again, nothing comes out of it. They cannot tie this guy to Jennifer Odom. And I mean, to make it even worse, he was arrested in some other attacks of 2 young women in Bradenton, which is very close to Sarasota.
Right.
And that first attack occurred on April 26, 1993.
Okay.
So that's not too long after.
Right. So kind of promising in one
right.
sense.
And apparently he grabbed a woman who was walking home from a beach club.
So just another sicko that they couldn't tie it to. But again, another sicko is the way I see it.
Yeah, a lot of sick people operating in and around Tampa, Sarasota, Bradenton. Now, I've got one fact that I read that really bothers me, and I want to talk about it. And it's the fact that the Jennifer Odom case is among several cases that are featured on this special deck of playing cards that is apparently distributed to jail inmates in Hernando County and throughout Florida. Jennifer Odom is pictured on the Queen of Diamonds. This makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like some type of marketing ploy where they put unsolved victims on these cards, hand them out to the jail, hoping with a tip line, hoping that somebody comes forward with some information. And then they say they get thousands of tips.
Okay, well now it makes more sense to me.
But how good are the tips, right? Do they lead to anything? They don't really say. I'm guessing, I'm hoping that they got the permission of the parents before placing those photos, because it comes across a little creepy.
It does. And when I read it, it was very creepy. But
Yeah.
now you're adding some context to it, and I still don't know if I like it, but I understand it a little better if they're using it to try to solve cases.
Yeah.
But it seems when I'm picturing some bad dudes sitting around a table playing cards with pictures of young girls on it and other missing women or whoever it is, I don't know. In my mind, I just don't think it's right.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the pictures had her with her Hooter sweatshirt on, and then the other picture showed a picture of the book bag and the clarinet case that they found. So I'm
So
guessing
obviously
they cropped different photos onto it.
Yeah, so obviously they are trying to use it as a
Yeah.
means to an end, but
So we know in February 2006, the local sheriff, they decided to go ahead and enlist the help of the FBI to basically reprocess the physical evidence that they do have on this case using the latest and greatest DNA technology advances that's out there. It generates some additional tips, but again, just like the deck of playing cards that go out to all the prisons in Florida, I guess, right? It gets some tips, some promising leads, but doesn't lead to any arrest.
yeah, nothing that
Nothing that can finally give any type of closure or get people running in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that's what's frustrating in some of these unsolved cases, because they get these leads and they're promising and they're working them and they just turn out to be nothing. So we got to jump up to 2013, Gibbs, and this is where the Hernando County Sheriff, he announces that they're going to dedicate a full-time detective to the case. Now, I don't know how many people had been working on it throughout the years. My assumption is, like many cold cases, they pick it up when they can, they work it a little bit. And we heard from the clip that they were doing something every Monday at some point. But now, I mean, they got a full-time detective on this case. And in addition to that, they've got 2 civilian volunteers that are conducting a full review of the case, going all the way back to 1993. They're going through every document, every report, every piece of evidence that has ever been gathered. And so this guy's name is Jim Bolin, and he actually heads up the cold case division. And again, he's saying all the right things, right? He wants to talk to anybody that saw anything about the blue pickup truck. He obviously wants to talk to the people that were in the blue pickup truck,
right,
near the bus stop. And I think the fact of the matter is, and we talked about it, that this area was such a remote, out of the way place that or you have to believe, whoever was in that truck either A, was the person or persons that abducted and killed Jennifer Odom, or they would have to have some really good information because of the timing. They would have had to have seen something. And I think it's at this time that they release some additional information about the truck. I mean, they say that it may have had some pipes or ladders in the back. It had rectangular side mirrors, a trailer hitch with wires hanging out, and a silver bumper in the back. So pipes and ladders, that's getting you into the area of maybe somebody that does some construction type of work.
Somebody needs a ladder to get up on the orange grove trees.
Yeah, I know you're back to that.
I am.
Somebody that works in the orange grove. But again, like you said, they're retesting all the DNA. I don't want to harp on it, but it makes me feel good that they're still.
Yeah, I mean, they're making every possible effort.
They're putting so much
Yeah.
energy into this. Now they haven't broken it, but I think it's great news that when you hear something like this, that they have not stopped. Now it's in June of 2013 that they think they have a break. And that break ties back to something that you mentioned early in the episode, and that's Lake Jovita.
Mm-hmm.
So the tip leads them back to Lake Jovita, to a home in San Antonio, Florida. So the part of the lake that they're searching is right behind this house. And this house is only about 4 miles from where Jennifer Odom was abducted.
Sounds promising.
Now, it's very promising. And we find out what they're looking for is a vehicle. So the tip, obviously, is there's a vehicle that was involved in the Jennifer Odom abduction, and somebody put it at the bottom of the lake.
Okay.
So they send divers out.
A new development in the Jennifer Odom case. Right now, dive teams and the FBI converging on a lake in Pasco County, searching for possible evidence.
Jameson, I can tell you what we just found out really within the last couple of minutes. There are dive teams here from across the country, from Miami and from Washington, D.C., FBI dive teams. But we do hear what they are potentially looking for in Lake Jovita is a vehicle. They are not saying definitely that it is a vehicle, but that is what sources are telling ABC Action News. They are also not confirming whether this is in fact related to the Jennifer Odom case, but the tip that they did receive that brought them here this morning was in reference to Odom's homicide about 20 years ago, last February. Now, you may remember that there was a very mysterious tip that some students on the school bus with Jennifer that day told detectives, and detectives have been following that for many, many years. It was a blue truck that some students, again, remember slowing down and talking to Odom, just 12 years old when she got off her school bus that day. Her body then discovered 6 days later in an old orange grove. We are about 20 miles from that orange grove right now.
So 4 miles from where she was abducted and 20 miles from where her body was ultimately found in the orange grove. Now, this house that they go to is owned by a man who was 46 years old at the time. So that would mean he would have been, 66 at the time they're searching this lake.
Right.
And I'm not going to say the man's name, but he was a member of a very prominent family in the area, ran a pharmacy, I think, downtown, and had some other businesses. So
yeah,
the guy had some money for sure and was part of a pretty prominent family. And he had been questioned a number of times. Right? I think he was questioned maybe in the beginning, as you talked about Lake Jovita a little bit. And what's interesting is the guy lives in Anchorage, Alaska, but still owns this house on the lake. Now, I don't know about you, but Florida is a long way from Anchorage, Alaska. For that to be your lake house?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why he still owns it.
Yeah, unless it was just in the family. He just doesn't want to let go of it.
Yeah, I don't have all the details. But, unfortunately, they spend several days diving in the lake. And again, I know it's like a broken record, but nothing comes out of it.
I hope they find what they're looking for and that they find the proof that they need. It rocked us. It shook us up, and it made us feel like, oh, you can't leave your kid at your own driveway anymore.
They searched all day Tuesday and came back today, but eventually called off the effort. Another tip leads to another dead end and another disappointment for those who have followed this horrible case from the very beginning.
A lot of people haven't forgot it, and they would like to see whoever got it get their due.
It's bothered me for a long time. I think it bothers everybody here. That there's nothing that has come of that. Not one piece of anything hard evidence that points to anybody.
Authorities say they've gotten hundreds of tips on this case. This one just got a little more of attention because of all the manpower that was out here in this residential neighborhood. The Hernando County Sheriff's Office still has a full-time detective dedicated to solving this case.
So this clip is from 2013. The reason I liked it was because you got to hear from some of the local residents, and we're 20 years on.
Oh yeah,
from this case, and you can tell that from what, especially like the woman was saying, that it rocked them back then, and it still is in people's minds 20 years later.
Sure. Now,
I like the guy, the gruff guy that talks, because I think if he gets a hold of the person, it sounds like he'd just take care of him himself. But
yeah, he's going to take care of business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, like we said, nothing comes out of it. And that's the frustrating part of this case is, thousands and thousands of tips, hundreds and hundreds of, really specific leads.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, probably 1,000 interviews. They interviewed close to 1,000 people. But in spite of all of that, they've never been able to catch her killer.
No.
They might.
One day.
Someday. I mean, we're doing these unsolved cases, and we're hoping that...
Yeah, I hope that somehow you're that one little fingerprint, or somehow they rerun the DNA, here again and find something, just to give the family some peace, And
I want to go back to one of the earlier clips we played before. I didn't talk about it while the detective was talking about it, but if you remember, he talks about how people like to talk.
Right.
And you and I have discussed that
absolutely
on other cases. And sometimes it really, I don't know, it baffles me how you can go so many years and think that somebody hasn't told one person, or hasn't let it slip, or hasn't maybe said it directly, but has implicated themselves by saying something else. And I always just say, I mean, there's one person out there at least besides the killer that probably knows.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people, like you said, they like to spill their guts.
They do.
I don't know. I mean, I've been told a lot of weird things from some people that you're like, why would you tell anybody that?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you have to feel really comfortable to say, oh, by the way, I murdered a 12-year-old.
Well, and I don't know if they would say that.
Right. But I think they probably would bring up, in a weird way, the case maybe.
Right. I mean, I was thinking in my head more like, oh, do you remember that girl that was abducted? It was weird because I was on that road.
Yeah.
That's what, in my mind, that's what I think somebody would say. Now, is the person that's hearing that putting or willing to talk to the police and say, yeah, I don't know if this is anything.
But he did say he was on that road that day when she was killed. You might want to talk to him.
So hopefully, someday they'll have some closure to this case. But, as of right now, they just keep working it, man.
Yeah. And I feel for the family, but like, I don't know how you ever move on. They're still living in the same house. I don't know. I just don't know how you.
Yeah, I don't know that you ever move on. I mean, look at John Walsh, right?
Sure.
His son Adam was killed, and he's got a newer show out now. He used to do America's Most Wanted, but he's got a new show out now on CNN, and he starts it out by saying, "I'm a parent of a murdered child, and I will always be a parent of a murdered child."
Yeah.
And that was in like the early 80s, I think. Late 70s, early 80s. I don't remember when Adam Walsh, was abducted and killed. But, John Walsh has gone on to do some great things. But I'm sure there's not a single day where that doesn't cross his mind.
Right.
So, all right. That is the very sad story of Jennifer Odom. And another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. For Mike Ferguson
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.